presents the season premiere of Monday Night Baseball. From Busch Stadium in St. Louis, the New York Mets, with the best record in baseball, take on the St. Louis Cardinals as Bob Ojeda faces John Tudor. Ojeda, acquired from Boston in an off-season deal, has helped to solidify the already formidable Mets staff. He's won 8. And Tudor, last year's Cy Young Award runner-up, has pitched extremely well, but in some very tough luck. Typical June night, warm and muggy, temperature in the 80s. We had some rain an hour and a half ago that canceled batting practice, but this one will start on time as the Mets and the Cardinals begin a series before a big crowd at Busch Stadium in St. Louis. I'm Al Michaels, and we begin a big series, our 11th year of ABC's Monday Night Baseball. 8 Monday games coming your way this summer. We'll have a Tuesday game 2 weeks from tomorrow. That will be the All-Star game, which we'll bring to you from the Astrodome in Houston, Texas. We'll have 3 Sunday telecasts for you in September and wrap up our 1986 coverage with coverage of both the American and National League Championship Series in October. And the Mets, I think, are already making their reservations for that championship series. They come in with a mark of 49 and 21, already 9.5 games in front of Montreal, and an almost unbelievable 18 in front of the St. Louis Cardinals, last year's National League champions. Tim McCarver is with me tonight. Tim is the announcer for the New York Mets, along with Ralph Kiner, Steve Zabriskie. You cover the team on an everyday basis. You're with them all of the time. Is there a feeling, an aura of invincibility around this team right now?
Well, Al, impressive. The Mets have been impressive. Invincible, no. The ball club can beat you so many ways. Ray Knight, George Foster, and Gary Carter from the right side, Keith Hernandez and Darryl Strawberry from the left side, and you have the table setters at the top of the lineup, Wally Backman and Len Dykstra. Do I think anybody can catch the Mets? No, but I also didn't think anybody could catch the Boston Red Sox back in 1978, or the Chicago Cubs when the Mets caught them in 1969, or the St. Louis Cardinals when they caught the Philadelphia Phillies in '64. And who would have ever thought that the Giants would have caught the Brooklyn Dodgers back in 1951?
So strange things have happened, but this is a team with Hernandez and Carter and Strawberry and Foster, and a sensational pitching staff and a great bullpen, and Roger McDowell 7-0. Is there one man this team cannot afford to lose?
I think the one man that can't be afforded by the Mets to go on the DL or for any extended period of time is Gary Carter. The Mets are thin in catching, and that's a very vulnerable position to be thin at. They can flip-flop with a lot of guys: Kevin Mitchell, Keith Hernandez, Danny Heap, George Foster, Mookie Wilson. But if Gary Carter goes down, the Mets could be in trouble.
A very comforting thought for the Mets would be not only the fact they're 49 and 21, but the Cardinals are 18 back. It's almost unbelievable.
It really is, and this was the same ball club that won the National League pennant last year, beating the Dodgers in the National League Championship Series. It really is amazing.
So it's the Mets taking on the St. Louis Cardinals, 2 left-handers, 2 who were teammates with the Red Sox. It'll be Tudor and Ojeda when we come back.
This ABC Sports exclusive is brought to you by Chevrolet, who invites you to drive today Chevy, live today Chevy. By Budweiser, Beechwood Age for that clean, crisp taste. This Bud's for you. By Gatorade Thirst Quencher. Gatorade is thirst aid for that deep down body thirst. And by Honda 4-Track all-terrain vehicles. Honda, follow the leader.
Let's take a look now at the Mets lineup. They start with Mookie Wilson, the switch-hitting center fielder, and then Kevin Mitchell is in the lineup tonight. Darryl Strawberry is out. Mitchell in right. Keith Hernandez comes back to St. Louis. And Gary Carter is the cleanup hitter. George Foster, with 13 home runs, bats 5th. Ray Knight having a great year at .307, batting 6th. The second baseman is the platooning Tim Tuffle, who faces lefties. Rafael Santana is the shortstop, and the Mets pitcher is Bob Ojeda with a mark of 8-2 and 7 of those victories as a starting pitcher. One other in relief, the Cardinal dugout, and John Tudor will be going to the mound as the defending National League champions will be taking the field very shortly, and they have lost 3 of the toughest games imaginable in their last 3 over the weekend to Philadelphia. But John Tudor, through it all this year, has pitched very well, though the numbers don't show it, and he talks about some of the differences between 85 and 86.
I think it's a little bit tougher right now. I think that you have to be mentally tougher to go out there and try and do your best right now, because we know that right now we're not in the race, and we know that we're a long ways from being in the race. But it gives us, I think, it gives me a little bit more initiative, because we're not playing well, and if I can go out and win some games right now, that it's a lot tougher to win games when you're not playing well than it is when you are playing well.
And defensively, back of Tudor tonight, Alan Nicely, recently called up from Louisville because Jack Clark is finished probably for the year. Nicely is at first base. Second baseman is Tommy Herr, who had a great 85, and he's having a pretty terrible 86, though he has been hot of late. The shortstop is the Wizard, Ozzie Smith, who was not particularly Wizard-like yesterday. A rare day for Ozzie, 2 errors, including a very big one in the 9th inning, and Terry Pendleton is the third baseman. And then in the Cardinal outfield, Vince Coleman, last year's Rookie of the Year, is the left fielder. In center field is last year's MVP and batting champion, Willie McGee. And around in right is Tito Landrum, one of the postseason heroes of 85. Back of the plate is Mike Heath, who came from Oakland in the Joaquin Andujar deal. And on the mound is the left-hander John Tudor, and 6-3 with a 2.23 ERA doesn't begin to scratch the surface, Tim.
It really doesn't, because mixed in with those performances, this being his 17th start of the year, are 7 no decisions. And in those 7 no decisions, he's worked 62 1/3 innings. And everybody knows 9 times 7, 63. And that means that he's worked 8.9 innings, almost 9 innings for every no decision that he's worked. And 3 in a row, 3 no decisions in a row.
So Tudor looking for some support and some offensive help, and that's something the Cardinals have not afforded any of their pitchers this year, as they come in last in the league in runs scored, last in the league in team average, and they're facing the team that leads the league in runs scored and leads the team and the league in batting average, as Mookie Wilson starts things off in the first inning, and the pitch missing for a ball. 1-0. Dave Johnson now in his 3rd season with the Mets, and in the comfortable position of a 9.5 game advantage over the second place team and 18 over the defending champions. 1-1. Greg Bonin is back of the plate. Billy Williams is umpiring at first base with John McSherry at second and Joe West at third. 2-1. Wilson started the season on the disabled list, Tim, and there is Whitey Herzog. Have you noticed any difference in him since he's come back?
I've noticed a big difference in him, and I think the one healthy thing about the New York Mets is they have several positions that are very competitive, and center field is one of them. And you always play better. That's an arguable point, but most of the time you play better when you're being pressed, whether you're a young ball player or an old ball player.
And that's grounded and one-handed nicely by Nicely, who flips to Tudor. So Alan Nicely with the K takes care of Wilson, and Kevin Mitchell is the batter. Kevin Mitchell on a Sunday in April on the 27th facing John Tudor, and he got a rare start at shortstop. In fact, his first start of his major league career at short, and that was the result the first time he faced John Tudor. So Tudor didn't know too much about Mitchell, but he found out something in a hurry. Kevin Mitchell, very versatile, and takes inside, ball 1. He's played 6 different positions. He has started in 5 different positions, and tonight with Darryl Strawberry resting a tender ankle, he gets the start in right field. You watched him, Tim. Where will he eventually wind up?
I think left field's going to be his position. If the Mets decide to sign George Foster after this year, then Foster obviously will be the regular left fielder. But if they don't sign him, I think you could look for Mitchell in left next year.
3-0 the count.
One of the interesting things that Davey Johnson told me before the ball game is with Bobby Ojeda pitching, he would much prefer to have Rafael Santana at shortstop because Ojeda throws a lot of ground balls. That's why Mitchell's in right field tonight.
And ball 4. So Mitchell walks on 4 pitches.
Batting third, number 17.
And Keith Hernandez comes
First
to the plate.
baseman, Keith Hernandez.
Strangely, earlier this season, and Hernandez, 3 years after the trade, still gets booed by a good portion of the crowd in St. Louis. Keith was hot early, but Gary Carter wasn't, and neither was Foster, and neither was Strawberry, and yet the Mets were off and rolling. And then the others began to get hot, and Keith slumped in June.
It's a matter of a team picking each other up, and that spells win, and that's what the Mets have been doing. 49-21, 9.5 games in front of the Montreal Expos. The Expos, meanwhile, are in the 11th inning at Wrigley Field and lead the Chicago Cubs 4-3.
Breaking pitch to Hernandez is in for a strike, and the count is 0-1. And there is Hernandez. Good April, great May, and a slumping June. One and one. Mitchell at first, held on by Nicely. No score in the first inning at Busch Stadium, where the Cardinals have had a lot of trouble this year. They are well under 500. 1-2. Odd thing about the Cardinals is this is a team really built for this ballpark. It's a big park and spacious with AstroTurf, as you can see, and a team that has to rely on speed and defense, and yet they've been better on the road in '86. Strike, and down he goes.
Hernandez probably caught looking for that big curveball. That is the 35th consecutive left-handed hitter that John Tudor has retired. Left-handers against Tudor this year are now 7 for 84, and that is a remarkable record. Unbelievable. 7 for 84 against Tudor.
And what makes it even more astonishing is that the fringe left-handers don't face him.
Right.
Carter's at the plate, a strike. The theory there is that if you're going to hit a lefty against a lefty, he should be a pretty good hitter. So Tudor is facing the good left-handed batters and getting them out with regularity.
Guys like Hernandez, Tony Gwynn, Leon Durham.
1-1 the count. Again, it's one of those crazy things where you're a victim of non-support. Your team goes in the tank early, so people begin to forget about you. And here is Tudor probably pitching as well as he did for most of 1985. And yet the numbers won't be close. As you look around Busch Stadium, 330 down the lines and a vast 383 to the alleys and 414 to center field. And tonight with heavy air and humidity, under any circumstances, a difficult park in which to hit one out. 2-2 on Gary Carter.
John Tudor with the straight change and the foul tip by Carter. That's what makes Tudor so effective, not only this ballpark, but his pattern of pitching. Changes speeds behind in the count, therefore hitters can't sit on one pitch.
Mitchell at first with a short lead, and the 2-2 to Carter is hit sharply on a hop to Smith, who goes to her for the fourth. No runs, no hits, and they leave one. And after a half, it's the Mets nothing and the Cardinals coming up. Cardinal lineup tonight. Vince Coleman to lead things off. He's in left field. And then Ozzie Smith batting in the number 2 spot. Tommy Herr, the switch-hitting second baseman. And then Willie McGee is now the cleanup hitter with Jack Clark on the disabled list. Alan Nicely, the recently recalled first baseman. Tito Landrum is the number 6 hitter. The catcher is Mike Heath batting 7th. Then you've got Terry Pendleton at third base. and John Tudor hitting ninth. And the Mets defensively, the outfield of Foster, Wilson, and Mitchell, with Knight, Santana, Tuffle, and Hernandez in the infield. Gary Carter is back at the plate. And Bob Ojeda, who came over from Boston, on the mound, and he has done everything the Mets could have expected.
Former teammate of John Tudor, and he loves the National League just like Tudor. Obviously pitching in a ballpark, even though he's 5-1 on the road and 3-1 at Shea Stadium, Ojeda is pitching much to the dimensions of this league as opposed to Fenway Park. There's Darryl Strawberry, who was scratched from tonight's ball game. He slid into second base yesterday at Wrigley Field in Chicago in the ninth inning, jammed his right heel, and the combination of jamming that right heel and John Tudor pitching spells a night of rest for Darryl.
Gonna give him a night off. It's not a bad night when you think about it.
That's right.
Big lead, Tudor on the mound, chance to get Mitchell into the lineup, a guy hitting .352. Here is Vince Coleman outside for a ball. Of all the crazy things that have happened this year in baseball, one of the craziest has to be a stretch that Coleman went through. A man with his speed somehow went 0 for 38 in there. I mean, it's tough for Bob Buell to have gone 0 for 38.
Bob Buell went 0 for 70 back in 1962. A lot of those outs that Coleman was making during that stretch were strikeouts and fly balls. He has still not mastered the art of putting the ball in play on the ground.
2-1 the count. One-day game, and Montreal was a winner, beating the Cubs at Wrigley 4-3 as Dan Schatzeder won it. And Smith was the loser, with Bob McClure getting the save, and Jody Davis hitting home run number 10. 2-1 to Coleman is outside.
Yeah, that game at Wrigley in 11 innings. Mitch Webster driving in the winning run in the top of the 11th inning with 2 out. And the guy he drove in, Dan Schatzeder,
who's been a big beneficiary of the 24-man roster.
That's right, as a pinch hitter.
Coleman fouling it away, and the count 3-2. Vince Coleman is the man who started last season in the minors and then came up early and never went back and stole 110 bases to set an all-time rookie mark in that department, and then fell victim to the runaway rolling tarp during the playoffs, which put him out of action in games 5 and 6 of the National League Championship Series, and of course for the World Series. He's come back this year, and he's hitting .252 despite that 0 for 38. Hit sharply to center, and Wilson racing back, can't make the play, and Coleman naturally can fly, so he's thinking 3, and he's in there standing.
Coleman leads the National League in triples with 7. And Mookie Wilson appeared to get a good jump on this ball. The ball does not carry in this area at Busch Stadium. Wilson appears to be timing that ball rather than going to the spot where the ball will come down. And he misses it by about 6 inches.
And now with Coleman at third and nobody out, Ozzie Smith at the plate. Infield up at first and third, back at short and second, and it's outside. 1-0. Crazily, with all of the Cardinals' offensive woes this year, and they're last in the league in hitting, is Ozzie Smith, who's been the big man for the team, with the bat at .302. And that's fouled back, and the count 1-1.
Batting .302, 25 RBIs, but he's made 11 errors. That's too short of last year's 13, and you mentioned the 2 errors that he made against the Phillies yesterday on that routine ground ball hit by Greg Gross of the Phillies, and then the grand slam home run by Samuel.
1-1 pitch is fouled away. We talked about 3 of the most gut-wrenching losses imaginable. On Friday night, the Phillies beat the Cards 2-1 in 17 innings, so you can imagine how many opportunities you have in a 17-inning game that were squandered. Then Saturday night, they come from behind and have the game wrapped up in the 9th inning with the score tied 4-4 and the bases loaded and nobody out, and Tommy Herr at the plate as Smith tries to check and can and strikes out. So Ozzie comes around, and Ojeda gets a big strikeout with Tommy Herr coming to the plate.
Batting third, number 28.
Ozzie Smith struck out only 27 times last year, and these are the things that have been happening to the Cardinals. Weird things. You mentioned Tommy Herr the other night.
Herr comes to the plate. The game is tied. The bases are loaded. Nobody out. The count goes to 3-0 with Steve Bedrosian on the mound. He strikes him out on the next 3 pitches. He then strikes Willie McGee out on 3 pitches, and he gets Mike LaValliere to pop out to end the threat. The Phillies get 3 in the 10th, and that was that. And then yesterday defied belief as Herr grounds it foul. Yesterday, Worrell comes in to pitch with a 3-run lead in the 9th inning. He gets the first out. He goes 0-2 on the number 8 hitter, Steve Jeltz, and walks him. Tom Foley loops a single. And then they get the second out and a ground ball to short where Ozzie Smith, on a routine throw to first, pulls Alan nicely off the bag to keep the game alive, and Juan Samuel hits the next pitch for a grand slam homer.
His first career grand slam home run.
And the Phillies won it 8-7. And Herr pops it up. And here you have the season in effect in microcosm as Hernandez makes the catch. The fans have been pretty tolerant for most of the year, but the frustration of this past weekend is beginning to manifest itself. 2 down. McGee is the batter, and Ed Lynch has been traded by the Mets to the Cubs, as you can see. In a deal announced this afternoon, Dave Lenderman and Dave Liddell, 2 minor leaguers, come over. So Lynch, who was on rehabilitation assignment in AAA, goes to Chicago instead of coming up with a big club. Strike.
And to make room for Ed Lynch, Rick Sutcliffe of the Chicago Cubs was put on the 15-day disabled list with shoulder problems. The same thing happening again for the Cubs this year that happened last year. All the injuries.
Little squiver, it's knocked down by Ojeda. And there's your Cardinal season, as we say in microcosm. Coleman triples, and Smith, Herr, and McGee can't get him home. We've played 1 no score back after this from our local stations.
He's 14-0, and he's baseball's hottest pitcher. Roger Clemens is scheduled to pitch as Boston takes on Oakland next week. For the Yankees at Texas on ABC's Monday Night Baseball.
The Gateway Arch on the banks of the Mississippi, framed in that shot as you take a look at the Wimbledon results today. And Mats Wilander was upset, the number 2 seed, beaten by Pat Cash. LeConte was a winner over Fitzgerald, so the 7th seed advances. Women's division, Martina, no problem. And the same thing for Chris Everett Lloyd as they advance. She beat Kathy Jordan. Helena Sukova was a winner. Bettina Bungie advances, as does Gabriella Sabatini. In some of the significant results today from Wimbledon. Al Michaels and Tim McCarver with you on the season premiere of Monday Night Baseball in St. Louis as we start the 2nd inning, and George Foster to lead off for New York. Foster had his 13th home run yesterday and takes outside, ball 1. Mets are going to have a very interesting decision to make at the end of this season as to whether or not to renew Foster's contract as he rips his foul. Tim started to talk before about Kevin Mitchell perhaps being the heir apparent in left field, but what do you do if Foster has a good year?
Well, I don't know what the Mets' thinking is. Of course, George off to a bad start this year, but 13 of his last 28 hits have been home runs. At that pace, if he gets 56 more hits, he'll hit 39 home runs this year. So you got to sign him.
In the air to center field and deep, but it's a spacious ballpark, and there's McGee about 405 from the plate. 1 away. With lighter air and a smaller park, that's number 14.
Interesting to note that Foster, with 347 career home runs, 4 behind Dick Allen. Dick Allen had 351 and was the only guy to ever play in this ballpark that wasn't intimidated by the dimensions here. Back in 1970, I was involved in that trade. He had 34 home runs, drove in 106 runs, and missed 6 weeks of the season.
So what's the answer then? A 40-ounce bat? Knight swinging and missing, and the count 0-1. Ray Knight, who in a way was on the very edge. He was on the precipice this spring and was close to, in fact, maybe even getting released or traded. At least he did not figure in the plans of the Mets outside of Davy Johnson, who stood by him, felt that he would do the job, and in fact that's exactly what he's done. Strike on the outside corner, and what a job he's done after being platooned last year with Howard Johnson.
Also, he's in that straight-up batting stance that was suggested to him by Bill Robinson, the batting instructor of the Mets. Standing straight up.
1-2 the count. Tudor, second best ERA in the league this month, to another tough luck pitcher, Rick Honeycutt. That's off the end of the bat to Ozzie Smith, and Knight is gone, and there are 2 down. Now Tim Tuffle comes to the plate, an off-season acquisition. Wally Backman does a good job facing right-handers, and Backman's having a good year, but they needed a right-handed batting second baseman as well, and Tuffle appears to have filled that bill.
Came over from the Minnesota Twins for Billy Beane. His name alone makes him belong in the big leagues. Billy Beane. So does Tim Tuffle, 2 alliterative ball players, right?
That's grounded and fair, and by Pendleton, whose anger he didn't come up with it, as Tuffle pulls in at second with a double. And that's the first hit for the Mets. Terry Pendleton, who normally moves to his right very well, and in fact made a play yesterday on a similar ground ball and turned it into an out, couldn't come up with that one. A double for Tuffle, and Rafael Santana comes to the plate. Santana really having problems offensively, and it's been that way throughout the season at 157. So you don't really have to guess as to why he's in the lineup. He obviously has a pretty good glove.
Especially with Ojeda pitching. Ojeda, a ground ball pitcher, and Santana should have a busy night.
1-0. Tuffle at second, but Davy Johnson normally loves the offensive shortstops if he can get away with it, the guys who can hit a little bit.
That's why Kevin Mitchell's played 9 games at short.
2-0 the count. Dave Johnson and the pitching coach Mel Stottlemyre.
Tudor won't give in to Santana in this situation with the left-handed Ojeda hitting next.
2-1.
The way the Cardinals have been scoring runs, your early innings are really game situations with a runner in scoring position, because if you give up 1, the Cardinals have not been mounting any kind of offense to overcome those early deficits.
3-1 on a change, and Ojeda waits on deck. No score in the second inning.
Outfield very shallow for Santana if the ball's hit sharply. There may be a play at the plate on Tuffle, who does not run real well. Average speed at best.
Waved at and missed. And it's 3-2.
There's McGee in center, shifted toward right center. Coleman straight away in left field. And the changeup as Santana waves at.
3-2 to Santana. Is hit sharply through the middle for a base hit. Now Tuffle will be waved in, and here comes McGee's throw, and it's way off the mark, and to the backstop it goes as Santana winds up at second. So precisely as you say, you have a possible play at the plate with Tuffle rounding third, and then Willie McGee throws the ball halfway to Creve Coeur.
keep in mind that the Cardinal outfielders have 24 assists already this year. Willie McGee has 5, but this throw, he kind of pushes the ball, gets up under it, and that ball just takes off. John Tudor not backing up Mike Heath. Santana could have gone to third base, but with Ojeda hitting, he decides to stop at second.
And the Mets take a 1-0 lead with Ojeda at the plate. And Tudor's pitch is high. By the way, there's no error on that play, the theory being that he would have scored anyway. You can't assume an error on a play at the plate, and the runner would have gone to second anyway on the throw home. So McGee gets away with one, at least statistically. 2-0 the count.
Here comes Tuffle, and he scores easily, but had that throw been on line, of course the throw over Heath's head, but if it's on line, they've got to play at it.
2-1 on Ojeda. Swing for a guy who played in the American League and naturally didn't come to bat for a number of years.
Still looking for his first major league RBIs, 3 for 32 on the year. He's a hacker.
And the 2-2 to him is grounded toward Ozzie Smith, who short hops the ball, throws in the dirt, and nicely, I thought, came off the bag, but they get the call anyway from Billy Williams at first base. And Bill Robinson will put up a mild beef. Looked like Nicely's foot came off the bag.
Nicely's foot had to come off the bag because he lost his balance. He didn't have control of the ball, actually, when he's in that situation. But they got the call, but the Mets lead it 1-0 after 1.5. Remember, you have to have control of the ball with your foot on the bag. Now, sure enough, the throw beat him, but did Nicely have control of the ball? Billy Williams thought he did. Here's another angle. Now, did he have control of the ball? See that ball rolling around in there? It looks like he did. Good call by Billy Williams.
As it turns out.
Uh-huh.
And here is Nicely, who's been up 6 times. Jack Clark tore ligaments in his thumb and underwent surgery. And Clark is gone, if not for the whole season, at least until the middle of September. So the Cardinals had to call Nicely up, and he'll platoon at first base with Andy Van Slyke, and he pops it up in foul territory, and Carter will not have room. 0-2. So Nicely, who can catch and had prior experience with Houston and Cincinnati, gets another shot in the big leagues. In 11, Montreal beat Chicago. Phillies and Pirates tied in the 3rd. San Diego has the lead in the 2nd at Houston. Atlanta leads the Giants 3-0. And LA and Cincinnati are tied 1-1 in the 3rd. 1-2. In the American, Toronto, a hot team. They won 20-30, tied with Boston 3-3. Detroit and New York are scoreless. Milwaukee has the lead at Baltimore in the 3rd inning. Change, and Carter was ready to whip it around. Minnesota and Texas is scoreless. They're just underway. Chicago and California, no score in the 3rd inning. 2 balls, 2 strikes. The count on Alan Nicely. Santana calls for it. 1 away. So Ojeda has set down 4 in a row after the leadoff triple to Vince Coleman in the 1st inning. And Tito Landrum comes up. Well, here's a guy who captured everybody's fancy when Coleman was hurt last year, the way he performed in the playoffs and through the early games of the World Series. But this year, a whole other story. Tito, who started the year platooning in right field with Andy Van Slyke, is hitting a paltry 176. One and 0. Dwight Gooden, the semi-mortal one. 9-3, and everybody wants to know what's wrong. 2-0.
Randy Neiman had a great line. Randy is a bullpenner with the Mets, a left-hander. And the other day he said, I wish everybody could struggle, or we're figuring out everybody should struggle at 8-3. At that time he was 8-3, and of course Gooden won yesterday at Wrigley Field.
In there, 2-1. Gooden won yesterday and threw 151 pitches.
Yes, sir.
After they were talking about economizing his outings. 3-1, less strikeouts, more groundouts and pop-outs, hopefully, and it didn't quite work out that way.
It's a two-way street when you economize. The hitters have to agree with what the pitcher's trying to do. I don't think hitters in the National League or the American League are that cooperative.
Popped in foul territory, and Carter has to be careful of the dugout steps, and that one's back about 4 rows anyway. So it's 3-2. Not going to get any help when you go in that direction here. We all know how steep the dugout steps are at Busch Stadium as you look at Ojeda and what he's done home and road with a 1.55 ERA away from home. And nobody is better, at least in 86. 3-2 on Landrum. He hits it foul. I said everybody knows how steep the dugout steps are here because you think back to the World Series last year and George Brett when he went sliding in.
Lee May knows how much momentum you can get coming down three stairs like that. That play was shown over and over and over again. Brett sliding in and Lee May making the catch of George Brett. George not catching the ball.
Half swing, and he foul tipped it anyway, and down he goes. So 2 strikeouts for Ojeda, and Mike Heath comes up.
Batting 7th, number 5.
A lot of right-handed hitters look for that off-speed stuff, which makes them vulnerable inside to the fastball. That's only about an 82, 83 mile an hour fastball, but it looks about 10 miles an hour faster because of the hitter's approach to the off-speed stuff. Ojeda really establishing that breaking ball early.
2 out, bases empty. You mentioned Lee May's name, and the irony here is that the Mets drafted Lee's son, number 1, and he signed today. The Mets have announced it. Lee May Jr., 18 years old, who grew up in Cincinnati, signed by the Mets. Heath hits a pop fly to shallow right, and it's Kevin Mitchell calling Tuffle off and making the catch to retire the side. Ojeda has set down 6 straight. Mets 1, Cards nothing after 2. 1-0 Mets. The Cardinals trying to snap a 3-game losing streak. Talked about yesterday's game. Here's the way it would have ended. Cards led by 3. First and second. 2 out. Greg Gross at the plate for Philadelphia. And a routine grounder to short. Easy play for Ozzie Smith, right? Comes up throwing, but he pulls nicely off the bag. He can't get back in time. And the next thing you know, as you take a look at the replay, and nicely couldn't get back to the bag to take care of Gross. With the bases loaded, Juan Samuel came up and hit the next pitch from Worrell to deep left field, a towering drive. Vince Coleman going all the way back, and it winds up in the basket. And that's a grand slam homer.
How about Coleman's line in the paper today? He said if he were 5 feet taller, he would have caught it. If he were 5 feet taller, it'd have been 11 feet tall.
Maybe Bowl with a little leap might have been able to pull that one back down. Wilson hitting it in the air to right field and down the line in foul territory and back out of play, and the count 1-1. Wilson, Mitchell, and Hernandez. Whitey Herzog, who won a world title here in 82 and a pennant in 85, and he'll manage in the All-Star game. And this whole season has been one expletive deleted for that man. And he doesn't mince very many words either. 1-1 pitch. Fouled away. You know, the one thing about Whitey is he's a very honest guy, and sometimes honesty gets you in trouble. And he said basically, hey, it's over. We're out of it. We're finished. I'm being honest with you guys.
Said that a month ago, didn't he?
And that created a stir. And then he said, forget it. Every time he's asked about it now, he says, I'm not going to get into it anymore. I'm tired of the controversy. But there's a guy who was blatantly honest. knows his team better than anybody. That's hit down the line and hooking and staying fair. Fielded on a hop by Coleman, but Wilson has good speed, and Mookie has a double. So 3 of the last 4 Mets with hits, as Wilson leads the third with a double to left, and Kevin Mitchell is the batter. There's Wilson, a man who's hit between 271 and 279 throughout his big league career. And this year coming in, he was at 291 tonight, and now he's 1 for 2.
I think in this situation with Mitchell hitting, I think you ought to put Mitchell on his own. None of that going to the right side to move the runner to third base because Hernandez is on deck.
And he goes to center field, and that one will drop in as Wilson had to hold and stops at third. So a single by Mitchell to center field, and the Mets have runners at first and third with Hernandez, Carter, and Foster still to come.
First baseman.
Had Kevin Mitchell just given himself up to move Wilson to third base, Hernandez would have been the hitter with Wilson at third and 1 out. But remember, John Tudor's retired 35 left-handers in a row. And he struck out Hernandez the first time. Normally, you'd love a situation like that with Keith. Actually, 36 with Bobby Ojeda.
So now Hernandez with runners at first and third, nobody out. 1-0 Mets, third inning. Infield is double play depth. 1-0. Smith and Herr will try to turn a double play, and they concede a run on a ground ball to a middle infielder. Him off, and the count 2-0 with Gary Carter on deck. That's going to run in the second on a double by Tuffle, and Santana's single to center. And threatened here in the third with Wilson at third and Mitchell at first and nobody out. Speed does Mitchell have?
He has good speed, but not in this situation with nobody out. I wouldn't think that Davey Johnson would be sending him. 2-0 to Hernandez. You want him to be selective up there, and he is selective. It's said about Keith Hernandez that he's as selective as a spoiled child's hearing. That's selective.
Who said that?
I don't know. They. The generic they.
Another throw to first base. Tudor driving Mitchell back again. Mitchell not taking a very big lead.
Mitchell has stolen 3 bases. He's a hard runner as opposed to a runner that runs fast. Looks like he's running fast.
Good breaking pitch, 2-2. Looks like he'd be a tough guy on a double play.
I'll guarantee you. A breaking ball on the 2-1 count, and Tudor continues to throw the breaking balls behind in the count. If you can do that and get it over, you're winning the big leagues.
And the 2-2, he fights it off and fouls it off. On the subject of tough guys breaking up double plays, how about Bo Jackson? Think about him sliding into second. And Bo tonight makes his debut as we speak for Double-A Memphis. And in fact, we'll have a report and be able to show you his first at-bat very shortly. In a game at Tim McCarver Stadium in Memphis is where Jackson makes his pro debut tonight. And the 2-2 to Hernandez is unintentionally Fouled away.
Well, I understand that stadium has two names now. It's Chicks, which is short for the Chickasaw Indians, and it's been the Chicks for a long time. And then, of course, it's my name. They call it a Memorial Stadium. And I told Tug McGraw asked me, he said, why is it a Memorial Stadium if you're 36 years old, still alive? I said, they named it after my arm. Died a long time ago.
3-2. Well, you'll live forevermore now in the annals of baseball as Bo Jackson makes his debut at McCarver Stadium in Memphis. Wilson at third. Mitchell at first. Nobody out. Tudor struggling in the early going, and the Mets on top 1-0 in the third.
And you can look for Mitchell to run here. But the thing, it's not important to get a good jump with the count 3-2. It's the same situation as a hit and run count. You cannot get picked off in that situation. It's up to the hitter to put the ball in play.
He doesn't go, and Hernandez pops it up near the mound, and it's nicely calling for it, and he makes the catch on the mound. Very big out, because now a ground ball gets you out of the inning. If you can induce one, and Gary Carter comes to the plate. Carter leads the league in runs batted in, along with Mike Schmidt. They each have 52. Funny, though, Schmidt is up in the threes. Mike having a great year with the bat, and Carter at 247. Away. And of course, one reason would be that the Mets have done a better job getting people on than the Phillies have, especially at the top of the order.
Lynn Dykstra, Mookie Wilson, Wally Backman, all having fine years. Man, look at that. 27 in the third. Coming into this game, 2 earned runs over that stretch. He's won 20 of 21 in this ballpark. 20 of his last 21 decisions.
That's fouled back, and the count is 0-2.
Only loss was to Ojeda and the Mets, and he trails them tonight 1-0.
That was here on the 27th of April, the day Mitchell hit the home run. Last year, John wound up 21-8, and as you'll recall, he was 1-7 at the outset of the year, so he wound up 20-1 outside. 1 ball, 2 strikes, the count on Carter.
Very interesting to watch the batting style of Gary Carter. Gary has tremendous strength in the upper part of his body, but his hitting technique, he doesn't really have that good a swing. He's very, very strong, hits a lot of balls out with his arms, doesn't use the lower part of his body real well. You can see that slightly open stance from our center field camera. When you have an open stance, it means you're slightly facing the pitcher. You've got a lot to do with that front side to get the front shoulder back into a hitting position. But Carter can bail out and hit balls out. He's awfully strong in the upper part of his body.
He hits that one by Tommy Herr for a base hit. Wilson scores. Mitchell stops at second, and it's 2-0 New York, as Gary Carter drives in his 53rd run of the season. So Gary's on a pace on which he'd wind up with about 115 to 120 RBIs.
Look what Carter does with that lower part of his body and the shoulder in there. And had the shoulder not been in there, there's no way to hit the ball low and away the other way. You hit the weak ground ball to shortstop, and the inning would be over. Good piece of hitting by Carter.
2 on, 1 out, and Foster at the plate. George flying to deep center in the second inning. He was the only visiting player to hit 3 home runs in this park last year. He had 2 of those off Tudor, and the other off Joaquin Andujar. 1-0 the count. Heath goes to the mound. And with Mitchell at second base and the runner at first base, Carter, Mike Heath going to the mound. It's been a very deliberate, slow, and getting to be painful inning for John Tudor.
And that's unlike Tudor, too. He loves to work fast. Think long, you think wrong.
Pitch is in there for a strike, and the count 2-1. Think long, think wrong.
That was an old saying by Jim Cott, who is now announcing for the New York Yankees. And nobody worked quicker than Jim Cott.
I like that. A little chopper foul.
And it's so true, too, because a lot of pitchers think that they have to do a lot of thinking. They have to think their way through ball games. They don't have to react. All the thinking should be done before the ball game. Baseball's a reaction sport, and you react to what you thought about. Anticipation now certainly is very important in baseball. But you can't anticipate quickly if you're sitting there thinking.
And it's true. I'm trying to think of the deliberate great pitchers of our time, and they are few and far between.
Steve Carlton, Bob Gibson, Sandy Koufax, Don Drysdale, all of them work quickly.
Very quickly.
Nolan Ryan.
Called strike 3 as Foster goes down on strikes and doesn't like that call. Plate umpire Greg Bonin, and the plate a little too wide for Foster's liking.
Well, it was a very close pitch, but it appeared to have the corner. But it might have been a little outside on second thought. But Tudor's a type of pitcher that's going to get a pitch like that because he works in and out.
Might have the corner of 6th and Main, but I'm not sure it had the outside corner here.
Hollywood and Vine.
Right. 2 down, and Ray Knight is at the plate.
It's like the corner I used to hang around.
That was a very dark corner. In the air and curling foul back out of play, and the count 0-1. Now let's think of the great pitchers right now. You talked about Seaver and your 300-game winner Sutton, good, quick, steady worker in a way. Phil Niekro, well, when he's in rhythm, Niekro can be deliberate at times, but that knuckleball is so erratic.
Gaylord Perry worked extremely fast when he was ready to work. When he had it ready, moisture-laden fastballs.
And that's hit into center field for a base hit. Harrelson waving the runner home as McGee's throw comes into second. Mitchell scores. Carter stops at second. And the Mets now lead it by a score of 3-0.
Why is a 2-out hit different from a hit with 1 out or none out? Well, the fact is, if you've got somebody on base and you don't get the hit with 2 out, well, the inning's over. You don't want to squander those runners at second base. And Ray Knight is a devastating hitter with runners in scoring position and 2 out.
36 RBIs now for the Mets third baseman, whose wife, Nancy Lopez, and their brand new baby here tonight, or at least in St. Louis tonight.
Nancy and Ray, of course, the proud parents of Aaron Shea Knight. S-H-E-A, but they had named the baby before Ray was traded to the New York Mets. The Mets, of course, home park, Shea Stadium.
Jim Tuffle with the count 1-0. The third, and Pendleton will do it himself to end the top of the third. But 7 men come up and 2 cross the plate, and the Mets now lead the Cards 3-0.
Corey McFerrin in New York. Bo Jackson's professional baseball debut minutes ago in Memphis, Tennessee. Double-A action, his first at-bat, first inning. Here's the pitch, and there it goes. A smash up the box, base hit, drives in one as the Memphis Chicks take a 3-0 lead over the Columbus Astros. Bo Jackson's decision to play baseball looking pretty good through his first at-bat. That's a story from Tim McCarver Stadium. Back now to Al Michaels and Tim McCarver.
So a successful beginning to Jackson's pro career as we update the scores for you. Montreal a winner. Fifth inning, the Pirates lead the Phillies 3-2. San Diego leading Houston 4-2 in the fourth. Atlanta 3 and the Giants nothing in the fifth inning. Dodgers 2, Cincinnati 1 in the sixth. American League, Toronto leading Boston 5-3 in the fourth. Yankees, who've lost 10 straight at home, are scoreless with Detroit. Milwaukee leading slumping Baltimore. Minnesota, Texas scoreless. California 2, Chicago nothing in the fourth inning. Here, the Mets with the best record in baseball, 49-21, leading 3-0. Terry Pendleton leads off in the bottom of the third inning and takes a strike. Pendleton, Tudor, and Coleman, the 8, 9, and 1 hitters against Bob Ojeda. And the talk has already begun when you think about a couple of the trades this year. Ojeda possibly in the World Series against his ex-mates Boston. And then more interestingly, after yesterday, what about Tom Seaver in the World Series against the New York Mets?
Tom Seaver traded to the Red Sox for Steve Lyons, who is now with the Chicago White Sox.
Pendleton with a single to left field. Second Cardinal hit, so Terry is on, and John Tudor comes to the plate.
Well, a changeup, and the one thing that impresses Mets pitching coach Mel Stottlemyre is the different speeds that Ojeda uses with his changeups. So that changeup with all those different speeds really serves as 3 or 4 pitches.
John Tudor, who switch hit for a while and then decided to go back to left-handed only. Fouls it at the plate. Tudor has sacrificed 8 times this year. Next Monday, if the Red Sox stay in their current rotation and without a rainout, Roger Clemens would start the game against Oakland. The Yankees in Texas will be our other game. That's next Monday at 8 Eastern time. And that could be an extremely significant game because Clemens is now 14-0 and has 1 start before that. Throw to first base to drive Pendleton back. Clemens could tie the American League mark Wednesday against Toronto. And if he were to do that, and again without a rainout and staying in rotation, then he could be going for the American League mark. The possibility exists of it taking place next Monday. So we will be in Boston for Oakland against the Red Sox. Clemens is worth watching under any circumstances.
He really is.
And then I would imagine we would see Roger 2 weeks from Tuesday again in the All-Star game as the starting pitcher. 1-1 the count on Tudor.
With a 3-run lead, the Mets will be trying to get just 1 out. They don't care whether it's at second or first. Naturally, you want to retire Tudor. Well, with a 3-run lead, you got to make sure of 1 out.
Hernandez fields. Tudor gets the job done. That's 9 sacrifices for him. Tim Tuffle gets to put out 3-4. And Pendleton at second base. Meanwhile, our final Sunday afternoon presentation of the year comes your way this week. Seattle and Boston with Tom Seaver scheduled to pitch for Boston on Sunday if they stay in rotation. And Detroit and Texas is the other game, and that starts at 3 Eastern time this Sunday. Vince Coleman tripled in the first inning, led off with a triple, and then was stranded when Smith, Herr, and McGee couldn't get the ball out of the infield. Pickoff play is on, and Pendleton goes back in with his hand.
When you're trailing by 3 runs, you better not get picked off at second base. This play really closer than it should have been. When you're trailing by more than 1 run, you got to play a bit more of a passive type of offense. That's one of the problems with falling behind early. It really takes away the type of game that you play best. And the Cardinals' best way to play offense is to be running. Run, run, run.
The Cardinals, despite their offensive woes, and we talked about their being last in hitting, last in runs scored, last in home runs in the league, at least they are still first in stolen bases. But they're a team that has to run and has to manufacture their runs in that fashion. With the loss of Jack Clark now for probably the rest of the season, their only home run threat, their leading home run hitter right now is Andy Van Slyke. We're almost at the halfway mark of the season, and Van Slyke has 4 homers.
And the Cardinals, as a team without Clark, have 17.
St. Louis with a total of 26. And the way it's going with Clark out, unless they make some sort of trade, they very well will wind up with less than 50. 3-0 the count.
And you're liable to see Coleman take 2 pitches off of Bobby Ojeda. He rarely has control problems, but he has fallen behind 3-0 to Coleman.
And Coleman is up. And Carter patting him as he sends him down to first base. In a way, from up here anyway, it didn't look as if it was that close. It was a pretty dramatic move by Coleman, but that's all. It's not that close.
Well, there are a lot of reasons that the Mets wouldn't want to throw at any Cardinal hitters. A team that's going, even though the Cardinals have won 6 of their last 9, they've lost 3 in a row, and you don't want to wake them up. It's that simple.
Ozzie Smith, 4th in the league in on-base percentage. A man always thought of as a glove man, takes a strike. Remember when Ozzie got that huge contract, won the arbitration case, and everybody said, how can you spend millions of dollars for a guy who could only do one thing, play shortstop? Well, he's hitting 300 right now as well.
And he had 276 last year. So since signing his big contract, he's become a better hitter.
Yep.
Think we ought to take that approach? What do you think?
Absolutely. At least have the chance to take that approach. In fact, we'll just make him our idol right now.
Of course.
0-2 to Smith is up high. 1-2. Center field, and Mookie Wilson. And tagging at second base is Pendleton with Coleman halfway to second. So Pendleton was tagging, and Coleman was almost running up his back on a fly ball to center for the second out.
Well, I guess you might ask why Coleman wasn't tagging too. He had already committed himself going towards second, and he's not that fast to get back to first and make the play to second base, or take the 90 feet to second base, coupled with the fact that he can steal the base anyway. He's stolen 45 to lead the National League, and he's been caught only 7 times. This is Coleman. Now his first reaction is towards second, and even had he really busted it back to first and tagged to go to second, it's just not a good percentage play. With the Cardinals trailing by 3.
Right. Coleman can be erratic as a base runner, even though he's got that blazing speed. He's prone to getting picked off. He's also the kind of guy that can induce you into balking. There have been 12 balks with Coleman on the bases this year, and as he goes, it's fouled away. So Vince was on the move, but Herr fouls it back.
Coleman with with 110 stolen bases last year. I might point out that the reason it was a good play for Pendleton to go to third is that he cleared the way so Coleman could steal second base. Even though Coleman didn't take the base by tagging up on the fly ball, Pendleton did make a good play, because had he not gone to third, it would be first and second and 2 out.
Swinging and missing, and the count is 0-2. Tommy Herr, he was down in the ones until recently, and his hot streak coincided with the birth of his second son. Tommy tonight comes in with a 10-game hitting streak. There goes Coleman. The pitch is outside. Carter bluffs the throw, and so it's an uncontested steal as Pendleton remains at third. Number 46 for the Cardinal left fielder.
And if the New York Mets do have an Achilles heel, it's Gary Carter's inability to throw base runners out this year. Of course, the pitchers have not helped them a lot, and plus guys are just too fast nowadays. I often said, you know, if you want to throw more guys out, just put the bases back 5 or 6 feet more. These guys outrun the ball. There's no chance to get Coleman in that situation.
Foul back. I think the best illustration of that would be through the years. One of the unbreakable marks used to be Ty Cobb's 96 steals. Everybody said, oh, that's one that will never be broken.
Right. And
then Maury Wills broke it. And then subsequent to that, of course, you've got the Brocks and the Hendersons at 130. And Vince Coleman is a rookie with 110. Fouled away, and 1-2. And years in which guys have 50, 60, 70 steals have become commonplace.
I think Wills really opened it up. I think that opened the eyes to baseball when he stole 104 in 1962, the most valuable player for the Dodgers. That opened up a whole new dimension in baseball.
One ball, 2 strikes, the count on Tommy Herr. To right field, and this will get Ojeda out of the inning. So the Cardinals squander a threat, leave men at second and third, and it's 3-0 New York through 3. Keith Hernandez is a man who knows the ups and downs and the highs and lows to extremes. I asked him if the game is still as enjoyable to him now.
I enjoy it. I don't know. There's times when you get tired of it, but you realize that it's a long season, it's a long grind. It's been 10 years. And you kind of wonder and you go, well, geez, I don't need this anymore. But, you know, what are you going to do after the game's over with? When you're through playing? I mean, even if you find something you like, you're not going to get the thrills that this game can give you. You know, there's so much enjoyment to getting that clutch hit, making the nice play in the field, winning a World Series. Those are things that I think nothing in life will ever do, nothing that kind of excitement will ever bring to me. So I'm 32 now, going on 33. I hope to play another 6 years, and then we'll just take the ball from there.
The reflective first baseman of the Mets, watching as his team leads 3-0 in the 4th inning, and Rafael Santana to be followed by Bob Ojeda and then Mookie Wilson. 1-1 to count. The way when guys are 31, 32, 33, as is the case with Hernandez, they're always talking about 4 or 5 more years. Then you get to be 39, 40, you talk about 1 more year as it's looped into right for a base hit. Takes the wide turn at first, and with Heath covering the bag there, the throw goes into second, and they tag him out. With 3 men chasing the pop-up, the first baseman, second baseman, and right fielder. Santana felt he could take the chance by making the wide turn, and Mike Heath made a great play here to back up at first base and force Santana to go to second.
I'll tell you, when you're a catcher, you run down to first base in situations like this, and usually the runner won't take the wide turn. He'll just try to go to second. But Mike Heath forced Santana to go to second base. Heath coming to back up first. Santana looks back, says, whoop, can't go back there, got to go forward. And Ozzie Smith made a great play on that in-between hop to tag Santana out of there. Indecision on Santana's part, and a good play by Landrum, Smith, and Heath.
Scored as a base hit, then 9-6 Landrum to Smith. 1 out, bases empty, and the 0-1 pitch to Ojeda is grounded down to Ozzie. Nice convenient hop, and quickly 2 down with Mookie Wilson coming to the plate. Mets on top 3-0. But talking about Hernandez, who was saying in that interview he's going to give it 5 or 6 years and look ahead. And then you've got your Reggie Jacksons, of course, and your Don Suttons who are playing it 1 year at a time. But what I love now are guys are signing contracts at the age of 21 and 22 and saying they're going to give it 4 or 5 years.
Signing major league contracts.
Exactly.
That's
Is that
right.
unbelievable? In all sports.
Well, there's a difference also in enjoying the game and living the game. Hernandez lives the game so intently that sometimes it's too intense. And that does take the enjoyment away from it after a while. The ability to relax is a cultivated thing, and it is an ability, too.
1-0 the count on Wilson, and it's outside, ball 2.
You can't just come up to the big leagues, go between the white lines and say, well, I'll just relax. No problem, no big deal. Not that easy.
2-1. Two now on Wilson.
Talked to Major League scouts for 25 years, and they say that this guy was quite a talent, but he just didn't have that one thing. And a lot of times that one thing is the ability to relax.
Oh, strike 3. So Mookie Wilson strikes out, and at the end of 3.5, still 3-0 Mets.
ABC's Monday Night Baseball is being brought to you by...
Quick scoring summary. Rafael Santana drove Tim Tuffle in for the Mets' first run in the second inning. And then it was Gary Carter driving in Wilson and Ray Knight driving in Mitchell for the 2 third-inning runs. The Mets lead 3-0 back of Bob Ojeda. And the Cardinals come up in the bottom of the 4th inning with their cleanup hitter Willie McGee swinging and missing. 0-1 on McGee, to be followed by Nicely and Landrum. Willie typifying the Cardinal woes. Last year the batting champ at 353, and now he's 110 points lower. Pop foul and back out of play, and the count 0-2. You know, Tim, it's something that we talked about during the 7th game of the World Series last year, that bizarre night and the circumstances remembered pretty well by everyone. The Cardinals losing the game on Saturday 2-1, the questionable Dinkinger call on the Orr to play at first base, Orr just hit, and then the blowout and blow up the next night when they lost 11-0 and Andujar and Herzog were thrown out. And the question became at that point, would there be some sort of carryover effect into 1986 for the Cardinals?
Well, of course, it was in 1969 when the similar situation happened with the Redbirds of '68. We were ahead of the Detroit Tigers 3-1. The Tigers, behind Mickey Lolich, came back, won 3 in a row, and we finished 4th in the first year of divisional play in '69. We had similar problems that the Cardinals are experiencing this year. Everybody had bad years, with the exception of Bob Gibson, of course. Steve Carlton had a good year that year. But, you know, you have to experience all the questions being asked over the winter. It sets in subconsciously. You realize you had the thing won. Some people feel the Cardinals were a superior ball club to the Royals. don't believe often on one thing carrying over from one year to the next, but I do put some weight in this particular thing, yes.
In a way, as McGee fouls it away and the count stays 0-2, it's the kind of thing Herzog has asked about it a lot, and so are the players, and you almost don't want to admit it or use it as an excuse. So as a consequence, at this time, they're not saying there has been a carryover effect, generally speaking, but it's the kind of thing where if a guy sits down 5 or 6 years, and if Whitey were to write a book in 10 years, he'd probably go back, and in the book in 1996, he would say, hey, yeah, there was some sort of carryover effect. Grounded to third, and Knight throws him out. So when you think about it for a while and you have a chance to reflect upon it, it had to have some sort of an effect.
First baseman.
And the effect visually there is in terms of where the Cardinals were in batting average and in runs scored, and as you can see, no team has ever pulled that off. Were that to stay the same through the balance of the year, to go from first to last in those two categories. Strike to nicely.
And only one team, the 1914 A's, 14 and 15 A's, have won it one year and finished the last the next year. 1914 and 15 Philadelphia A's under Connie Mack. A lot of extenuating circumstances, so I've read. A lot of players leaving the next year and what have you.
That's when he pulled his Charlie Finley act in a way by selling off a lot of his stars. Little looper, and that one gets by Hernandez for a base hit down into the corner, and maybe two, but no. Nicely doesn't run very well, and he stops at first with a single. Third hit off Ojeda, just out of Hernandez's reach.
Little cue shot, nicely hit it right off the end of the bat, and Hernandez can't get to it. And will play behind nicely at first base.
Tito Landrum struck out in the second inning at 174 now.
Al, I ran this theory by Davey Johnson yesterday after the Cub game, and Davey said, we lost to the Mets in '69, but we came back to win it in '70. They beat the Cincinnati Reds. They won the pennant the next year, but lost to the Pirates. But I said, but you weren't down 3-1 and had the other ball club come back and beat you 3 in a row. There's a difference.
Landrum pops to Hernandez, and there are 2 down. And again, it's not just that being down 3-1, but it's how you lost it. Because you keep thinking to yourself, and Denkinger, man enough to admit it in the offseason, that he may have blown the call, and if he doesn't blow the call, well, you don't know how the rest of the inning will go, but the Cardinals conceivably win it to 6. And then you've got that crazy, tempestuous scene the next night where you lose 11-0, and Andujar's gone, and Whitey's gone, and you're angry, and Tudor cuts his finger. And you have all offseason to stew about it. Heath grounds it down to second, and that's that. No runs, a hit, and a man left on. So we go to the 5th at Busch Stadium. Mets 3, Cardinals nothing. Busch Stadium in St. Louis. Al Michaels along with Tim McCarver, with Chuck Howard and Chet Forty manning the truck. Our season premiere, and update the scores for you. San Diego 4-2 over Houston in the 5th. Atlanta still leads the Giants 3-0. Houston is in first by a half game in the West, and the Dodgers swept by Houston this weekend, trying to rebound, lead Cincy 3-1 in the 7th. Toronto leading Boston 6-5 in the 6th inning. The Blue Jays trying to make a move. Detroit and New York are tied in the 7th inning. Baltimore has the lead now over Milwaukee. Minnesota leads Texas in the 3rd, and the Angels 2, Chicago nothing in the 5th. Toronto, if you have not noticed, has moved into 3rd place, and they start the night 9.5 back, with the Yankees in second, 8 back of the Red Sox. Kevin Mitchell at the plate. Want to know the count. Kevin Mitchell starting at short, right, center, 3rd, and 1st, and he has also played left field, though not as a starter. In the air to deep left center field. Willie McGee goes all the way back, and it's in the basket for a home run. So So for the second day in a row, a home run by an opposing player in a basket that was put in place a couple of years ago to keep the fans from reaching out and interfering with balls in play. And that's the ground rule here. Hit it in there and circle the ball.
And remember Vince Coleman's line. If he were 5 feet taller, he would have caught the Grand Slam home run hit by Juan Samuel yesterday. And I guess Willie McGee could say the same thing. Maybe 2 feet taller.
Hernandez hits it foul. And yesterday when Samuel hit it in there, it turned Herzog into a basket case.
Both balls catchable were it not for the basket.
4-0 Mets. Tudor deals 0-1, and Hernandez breaks his bat and grounds it to Ozzie Smith, who throws him out, and there is one away here in the 5th inning. So Keith is 0 for 3, as Tudor keeps getting the left-handers out, but it's been a different story with the righties. 4 runs, 8 hits for the Mets.
Kevin Mitchell with home run number 4 has scored 2 runs, driven in a run. And with the 24-man roster, players like Kevin Mitchell are becoming very, very important. Guys who can play a lot of positions. Kevin can also catch. He takes infield practice behind home plate at times.
Carter takes inside. Mitchell, by the way, is the guy who you may have read about, slid into 3rd in San Diego. And with Greg Nettles standing there, he says, "My dad says hello." And Nettles says, "Who's your dad?" And he says, "Earl Mitchell," who turned out to be Nettles' backcourt mate in a basketball team, on a team, at the San Diego High School.
That's when you, as a major leaguer, really have to question whether you've played too long.
Toward the middle, that's a relatively easy play for Ozzie, who throws Carter out. And there are 2 down. So deja vu tonight. It was Mitchell hitting that home run off Tudor on April 27th and duplicating the feat.
As you said, a routine play for Ozzie Smith. Carter does not have good speed, and Ozzie gets him easily. Footwork, very important for a middle infielder. You saw how Ozzie Smith caught the ball and then positioned his body to make the good strong throw to first base.
George Foster fly to center and struck out. Inside, ball 1. Mets 4, Cardinals nothing. 2 out, bases empty in the top of the 5th inning. One and 1. That's the kind of pitch Tudor has thrown all too infrequently tonight. Good pitch, turns it over, gets him to chase it. 2-1.
John Tudor could have been a Met. He was drafted 21st in 1975, didn't sign, and signed the next year, the next January, with the Red Sox. Number 3 draft choice of the Red Sox. And he's going against a non-drafted free agent tonight, Bobby Ojeda.
2 teammates in Boston. Tudor, by the way, no overnight sensation. He had some decent years at Boston, but nothing that would electrify you. And then he went to Pittsburgh for a year, and then the trade to the Cardinals. He fights it off and hits it into right field for a base hit. So a 2-out single by George Foster, and it brings Ray Knight to the plate.
Tell you, this is the type of hit that a lot of strong hitters get, because you have to respect their power and play them deep. And because Landrum was playing him deep in right field, he dunked one in front of him. Greg Luzinski, a typical example of that. Of course, Bull could hit the ball out of sight, but he used to get a lot of flares, a lot of broken bad hits to the opposite field, because the right fielder had to respect his power and play him deep.
bullpen, that's Rick Ownby, former Met property, throwing. Tudor is due to bat second when the Cards hit in the bottom of the 5th inning. Tim, what do you think? Do most power hitters prefer to have the outfielders playing shallower or deeper when they come to the plate? What would you think?
Power hitters like for outfielders to play shallow so they can rocket them over their head. The only problem I have with any power hitter is there aren't too many guys who can drive the ball over the opposite fielder's head. And I think too many dunkers are had in all of baseball. Of course, this base hit is a legitimate hit because it's pulled to left.
A legitimate dunker.
Yeah. But the dunker's the other way. Most guys cannot drive the ball over the opposite fielder's head. Unless you're talking about Murphy, Schmidt, Guerrero, guys like that, certainly. Strawberry, not too many left-handers. Kevin Mitchell can do it. He's strong enough to do it. But not too many guys can drive the ball over the opposite fielder's head. Now, they may hit a fly ball, a right-handed hitter over the right fielder's head, but that's different because you have time to get back on it. And I think in both leagues, the opposite fielders, generally speaking, play too deep.
I would agree. Tudor, after consultation with Heath, and you can see the frustration written all over John's face as he gives up the 2-out singles to Foster and Knight. Now taking on Tuffle. Only the second time this season that Tudor's given up 4 earned runs in a game. Strike. Even though he was 6-3 coming in, we illustrated early on how he'd been the victim of non-support. Tough luck. Had pitched extremely well. Had several no decisions when he could easily have had victories. But tonight, not a good outing. Fly ball to McGee. And so no further damage in the inning after the leadoff home run by Kevin Mitchell. The Mets have 10 hits and a 4-0 lead after 4.5. On Wide World of Sports coming up this Saturday, Syed Awita, Steve Scott, Steve Cram are among those you'll see in the Dream Mile from Oslo, Norway, and also the Firecracker 400 stock car race from Daytona Beach, Florida. That's this Saturday on ABC's Wide World of Sports. Bottom of the 5th inning, Terry Pendleton leads things off by fouling it away. 0-1. Pendleton, and then they'll go to their bench as Jose Oquendo has come out on deck to bat for John Tudor, and then we'll see Coleman. And Rick Ownby in the bullpen. He'll face the Mets in the 6th inning. Pendleton slashes it to right field, but there's Mitchell making the play. Gauged it perfectly and reached down to grab it. One away in the 5th inning, and the former Met, Jose Oquendo. And wait till you see his average.
Remember, we were talking about the opposite fielder playing shallow. Well, Kevin Mitchell plays shallow and makes a nice play. Had he been playing Pendleton deep, the ball falls in front of him. Cheito Oquendo from Rio Piedras, Puerto Rico.
Former Met and hitting .356.
He is switch hitting again this year for the first time since 1983.
And as a right-handed batter, he is 8 for 19. He has 6 singles and 2 doubles, so he's batting .421 from this side of the plate. Oquendo, for a brief while, a couple of months, a couple of seasons back, the Mets starting shortstop. In there, 0-1. Oquendo, one of 6 switch hitters for the Cardinals. Breaks his back, but it's been that type of a season for him. Another hit. A long single. Down by 4, he's not going to chance it, so he's held to 1. And Oquendo now hitting .450 from that side of the plate. Meanwhile, the Monday Night Quiz, the catcher for Steve Carlton's first major league start.
It was not Bob Uecker.
See if you win a trip to Hawaii. Coleman at the plate. Foul tipped at the plate. Well, Carlton is forever linked with his battery mate McCarver.
Right.
And in this instance, the answer is...
I think Pat Corrales.
It was Euchre.
It was you. It was you.
And
That's
Carlton somehow was able to withstand that and go on to that type of career.
Or you could say that you helped him out so much that the next 18 years he struck out close to 4,000.
And if Steve spoke to the press, I'm sure he would tell you who he owes it all to Euchre. 1-2 the count.
Steve was called up in September of '65, and I'd forgotten that. I thought his first major league start was back in '66, and Bob, in the meantime, had been traded to the Philadelphia Phillies for a ton of players to be named later.
That is amazing. It's incredible how Euchre winds up as the answer to all these bizarre things. Grand slam off Koufax. Hit sharply to Knight, drops it, picks it up, has time still for the force. That ball was hit so sharply, Knight had to be thinking double play, even though it was Coleman, a man who's very difficult to double. And then all of a sudden, he just winds up with one.
Talk about not being able to find the handle. See Ray's rear end? A lot of times when the rear end's high, you catch the ball back between the legs. When the rear end is down, you push your hands out. That's what happened tonight. He couldn't find it, but he did find it in time to get Oquendo.
So now Coleman at first base, 2 out. Smith at the plate. And he's taking his normal size lead. Here you are, you're down 4-0. Normally, you're not going to run. But again, the Cardinals are a team, they've just got to scratch it out one by one. So maybe you do run. Or maybe you do run, as the saying usually goes.
Well, we mentioned earlier about how Wills really opened a new dimension in baseball, and along with that, teams are not as conservative when they're behind as they used to be. They're not playing as passive a brand of baseball now as they were inclined to play before Wills opened things up, and then Lou Brock to follow.
I think if I'm Herzog, I send him, because you're down 4-0, but you're not going to get a 3-run homer from anybody in this lineup. And if you can get him to second and you get a single, at least you got a run. Thinking about going.
And if you're Bobby Ojeda, on the other hand, you don't want to be too concerned about Vince Coleman, because the end result, the best thing that could happen for the Cardinals is a steal of second base and then a base hit by Smith, unless Smith, of course, takes him deep. And he only he had 5 home runs last year, did Smith, and none this year. Well, the odds are against him going deep.
Coleman goes, the pitch is low, and Carter's throw not in time. 2 steals tonight, 47 steals for the season now for Coleman. And he's on a pace for triple figures again.
You saw him pick that right foot up, and usually you pivot on the right foot. Gives you an idea of how much speed he has. That is not your proper technique. I think Joe Morgan pointed that out in postseason play last year. You pivot on your right foot. You don't pick the right foot up, because technically you lose about a half a step when you pick that right foot up. But Coleman's so fast it doesn't matter.
2-1. See, he's got 47 steals now, and we're about a week shy of the halfway mark. So he's on a pace that would give him over 100. He's 11 for 11 against the Mets. Ricky Henderson leads the American League. There he goes to third. He's not finished yet as he steals third.
Oh, that's a bad play, in my opinion. That was a very, very close play at third base. And if Coleman's thrown out in this situation 1 out of 100 times, and that's an exaggeration, but you cannot be thrown out in this situation, and he was very nearly called out at third base. A very close play.
Not down 4-0 to end the inning on a steal of third.
With 2 out.
Very close. Nonetheless, 48 steals up high. And Smith is aboard. So runners at first and third, and Tommy Herr is the batter. I bring up that pace that Coleman's on only for one reason. He's been slumping. He came in tonight hitting only .252. You begin to think about a hot second half for Coleman, and let's say he gets on a lot and he starts stealing a lot, and with the Cardinals way out of the race, and you're thinking about putting seats or bodies in seats in late August and September, one way to do it would be to have Coleman chasing down Henderson's record. Not that they're thinking about that right now, but the guys in marketing wouldn't mind it.
Well, the Cardinals over 1 million this year, the earliest in their history.
Right now they're second only to the Dodgers in National League attendance. Herr fouls it away. One reason is the residual effect. When you win a pennant, as the Cardinals did last year, you sell a lot of tickets in the offseason. People want to come to the ballpark as Coleman is at third and Smith is at first. So your season seat sale goes up and your advance sale goes up, and people start talking about you, and you draw normally a lot better at the beginning of the year than you would.
Yep.
And there's a carryover effect. Smith goes, it's inside, and there's no throw. So that's the third steal in the inning for the Cardinals, their fourth steal of the game. On Saturday night against the Phillies, they stole 5 bases in the 7th inning, 6 in the game, and lost.
Their high for the season is 6 stolen bases against Montreal, and they will probably eclipse that 300 stolen base mark as they did last year. They stole 314. Only 5 teams in Major League history have done that.
So Herr with a chance to drive in a couple with a single and get him back in the game, and gets backed off himself. 2-2.
And Al, also, if I point out that Vince Coleman stealing third was a bad play, as you see this tight fastball to Herr. Actually, it turned out to be a good play, because there again, it cleared second base for Ozzie Smith to steal it, and now the Cardinals have 2 runners in scoring position.
Well, they have forced the issue, and all they need to do is cash in right now, and they can't, as Herr strikes out swinging. So they leave 2 more. The crowd comes down on their Redbirds as